Chapter 1 New Game. In a place outside of reality was a room carved of 16-dimensional space. Within sat 5 of the most powerful existences in the omniverse known as Marvel. The room itself, if described from a 4-dimensional perspective, would appear to be crafted of sculpted crystals with each facet of every surface reflecting a different indescribable color of light. However, regardless of the beauty of the room from a mortal perspective, the closest term that could be used to describe the layout of the room would be the word bar. Eternity, Infinity, Lady Death, and the Living Tribunal were considered among, if not at the very peak of beings that exist. Lady Death had also invited the Phoenix Force, whom she encountered earlier trying to save a 10-year-old girl. The girl in question was trying to save a dying friend and almost found herself dragged to Death's realm herself had it not been for the Phoenix Force's intervention. Safe to say, this got Lady Death's attention, which led to the invitation. Contrary to popular belief, the existences at the peak of the Omniverse did in fact have complaints and issues with the various multiverses and the universes they contained. Within the bar, Death took the form of a tall woman with bone-white skin and long ash-gray hair. She sat at a bar stool and wore an elegant black cloak that seemed to be woven from silk and shadow. Sitting at a table was Eternity, who appeared male, but had no distinguishable features other than his face. His bipedal silhouette contained stars and planets within its shimmering darkness. Sitting across from him was Infinity. She appeared as a gold woman of the same stature as Eternity, though slimmer in form with black markings and skin that rippled down like golden sand with the ever-flowing passage of time. Setting down her glass, Lady Death complained aloud with a firm voice that never lacks sophistication. Last week, those beyonders of one of the multiverses killed every single molecule man of that multiverse at the same time. The Phoenix Force sat a seat away from Lady Death on another bar stool. In the presence of these beings had an appearance of a beautiful bipedal woman composed of elegantly flowing flames. Compared to the forms the other cosmic beings had taken, she was the shortest, but she didn't mind. She asked Lady Death, but why would they do that? If the multiverse ended, no life existed, so she didn't exist there and didn't know what happened. Eternity answered her in a low, gruff voice. They ensured this molecule man character had a power which existed at the heart of the universe, and when the man's existence was removed, it caused the collapse and obliteration of that universe. By doing so to all of them in that multiverse at the same time, it destroyed the whole multiverse in a single moment. The Phoenix Force became even more confused, but why? Why would they commit such a senseless act of destruction? Infinity answered in a stoic yet feminine voice. They wanted to see what would happen if they did it. She downed another glass and motioned for Eternity to refill it. The Phoenix Force was rendered mute at the given answer. All entities called the Phoenix Force that existed in the various multiverses were her, but they were also individuals as well. She could connect to them and direct them at any point, but when not actively connecting to them, they would do their own thing. It was the same for all the other beings in this bar. Being both a single being and infinite beings simultaneously was not an easy thing, and it was easy to lose track of the infinite other selves when not actively connecting to them. The purpose of the bar was for the omnipresent beings to get together every once in a while and get drunk and get their complaints off their metaphorical chests. They'd often invite another being to give them a glimpse of the problems the higher-ups had and get better acquainted. Doing so allowed the omniverse to run much smoother, and it just so happened this time the Phoenix Force was invited. Getting drunk had a somewhat therapeutic effect on the infinite individuals, as they could more easily connect to their infinite selves while drunk and discuss the general and specific problems with everyone. The origin of the bar was an experimental challenge given to Eternity some unquantifiable time back to create a means for a cosmic being to get drunk. He succeeded in creating what he called Eternal Ale, alcoholic proof, infinity. The brewing process would start during the Big Bang and would finish fermenting right before the Great Collapse. It was a brew that took the lifetime of a universe to make, and he couldn't make much of it as only specific universes were born that even had the right conditions for the brewing. Once he accumulated enough of it though, he'd invite the other cosmic entities and they'd all get drunk. The Omniverse benefited from the drunken complaining bonding time in odd ways, so it had continued ever since. Sitting on his own bar stool on the other side of Lady Death was the Living Tribunal. As a being with 3 differently covered veiled faces on 3 of the 4 sides of his head, he drank 3 times as much as the others to get each face had successfully drunk. He was in fact the most powerful of the assembled beings, and he too appreciated the occasional time given to wind down and complain with beings he did in fact consider friends and family. One of the Living Tribunal's faces, the partially covered one that had domain over vengeance within the Omniverse, said with an unconcealed edge in its voice, "Those beyonders. They think they can treat everything as they wish. It is but a game to them. The uncovered face rebutted in a slow slur, they are a necessity to everything as a whole. As you know. That face had domain over necessity, so it was of course considered an expert on the subject. The last face, the one that was completely covered by a veil, said in a crisp-cut voice, but after doing so, no price will have to be paid by them for such a transgression. Can this be tolerated? The last face with domain over equity felt uncomfortable when things did not balance out, and it couldn't see anything on the other side of the scale when some beings annihilated a multiverse just to see what would happen. Death considered this for a moment and answered the arguing faces, the price they must pay is that they will stay in an empty multiverse until the collapse of the Omniverse. None of them shall be allowed to trespass another multiverse nor create one anew. Agreed, all three faces of the living tribunal simultaneously replied. Finishing her glass once more, Infinity said with irritation in her voice, beings like the Beyonders can only be punished once they have gone too far and only by their own actions. Eternity added, not just the Beyonders. The Celestials and the Norns of every multiverse treat the whole of it as their own playground to do with it as they please and play whatever games they wish, as if each universe didn't already have a game master. The Phoenix Force nodded after downing another glass of eternal ale. Even when using an avatar, she had never truly gotten drunk before, so this was a new experience. She knew of the Celestials and the Norns as she had many run-ins with them as well in various forms. The Celestials decided that the universe must progress in a direction of their choice, and they seeded and destroyed worlds as they pleased to further their decision. The Norns were the fate weavers and storytellers. They pretty much decided at birth whether or not someone would live a blessed life, a cursed one, or an ordinary one. They did not make the decisions for that person, of course, but they did arrange in advance the trials or lack thereof any given person would have to go through. If they were neutral, that would be fine, but they seemed to have their own agenda and their own interests, and more often than not they would interfere with the lives of others they felt got in the way of those interests. The flame-embodied woman said in a light yet drunken slur, you know, if you really wanted to ruin their games, you could change the rules they are used to so they no longer apply. Lady Death gave an amused look to the embodiment of life and passion and said, oh? And how would such a feat be accomplished without throwing off the balance we ourselves are tasked with maintaining? The Phoenix Force had many avatars in many multiverses and had experienced many things with many interesting people. As such, she had her own unique perspectives on such matters, and it took only a moment of drunken contemplation to think of something. She answered back, those Beyonders gave a person the purpose of destroying the universe on his death, right? If that kind of thing doesn't throw off the balance, then couldn't we do something like that? What if we gave a person powers which changed the rules of the game those guys force everyone to play by? Death's amused look changed into a pondering smirk. She was actually the least affected by the eternal ale, but she still liked these occasional get-togethers as, oddly enough, it made her feel alive. Ordinarily, she would pass on the Phoenix's suggestion. However, her somewhat drunken state allowed her easy access to herself in all multiverses, including a specific universe where a certain series of events crafted by the Norns was coming into play. It just so happened that she could hijack their carefully laid out plans and, with some items already in place along with some help, they might make something rather interesting. The other cosmic beings listened to the Phoenix Force's suggestion but didn't think much of it. It was not their place to interfere. That was until Lady Death spoke up. I like it, but a test run would be prudent. I have a candidate in mind that would do well. She sent the information to each of the other beings. The Phoenix Force was quite surprised that the chosen candidate was in the very universe of the girl she had just saved. They were even on the same planet and about the same age. Death had also given the details of some of the things of that world they would have to work with and the events that would allow them to change a few things. The Living Tribunal passed his senses over the candidate and was a bit surprised. Not at how young he was. Age mattered little to him. The Living Tribunal was capable of simultaneously looking through other universes for the same person and could see their actions at many ages, so he was easily able to get a clear picture of the mortal's potential and future. What startled him was that should this candidate be similar to his parallel counterparts, even he, the Living Tribunal, judge and jury of the Omniverse, would have no notable complaint. For a being with three separate personalities, having all three agree on a single thing was surprising. Eternity and Infinity looked at each other before nodding. They calculated out how much each could contribute without breaking the balance and how to set it so that their chosen would be both protected and formidable without being catered to or pampered. As each discussed what they could contribute, they realized the irony behind the form the power they were crafting had taken. They felt it really did balance out quite well. If those other beings of great powers thought this world was solely their game, it was time to introduce a new player. The power they crafted would turn the Chosen into a video game character when granted along with the timing of a specific event the Chosen would soon go through. The concept of video games had been shared by Lady Death and the Phoenix Force, who both had more knowledge of mortal lives than the others. Eternity and Infinity's power would grant a game-like system that included a pause function and infinite inventory. The Living Tribunal's power would generate quests for the Chosen to guide him to accomplish deeds that would go towards making that universe a better place. The Phoenix Force came up with the experience, level, and even a respawn system. She had more to work with, as the granting of the power would occur with the awakening of the Chosen's innate abilities, which could be directed by her. Lady Death's granted power would assist with the respawn system as well as grant a tutorial period for the Chosen. She also intended on using some existing materials in that universe that were under her domain, 3 items in particular. They would be used to make sure the Chosen's abilities and potential were rendered invisible to those beings of great power capable of seeing such things, while keeping the Chosen's powers flexible. On the 26th day of July of the year 2003, 9-year-old Harry Potter sat alone in a cupboard under the stairs of number 4 Privet Drive. There were many universes with a Harry Potter, but this one's time, as written by the Norns, was coming to an end. This Harry had discovered he could do magic when he really tried to, and a few years back, he had consciously started suppressing it. As far as he knew, suppressing it prevented accidents from happening, which, although had not made his relatives treat him better, it had made sure they didn't treated him worse. Most of the time anyways. He already felt the pressure in his gut making him ache, but since there was an accident today that his relatives blamed on him, the cupboard he was in had a lock on it and he was unable to leave. His relatives, the Dursleys, were upstairs trying and failing to fix a game station Dudley had gotten for his birthday a month ago but had broken accidentally. Rather than admit the truth, he blamed Harry, even though everyone knew Harry would never step foot into Dudley's room. Dudley was currently whining that Harry's aunt and uncle should buy him a new one. Harry doubted anyone cared that his own birthday was supposedly next week. What was strange, however, was that although Harry knew his relatives to be upstairs, he could have sworn he heard footsteps outside his cupboard door. At that thought, he realized how pathetic it was that he had considered the cupboard his. That was like saying the trash can belonged to the trash. This wasn't his space, it was just where they put him. Harry felt the pressure build up in his bones, and they somehow felt worse than they did when they were broken. He decided to go for broke and asked softly to whoever might be there, "Hello? Can I come out? I don't feel so good." A moment later Harry heard what could only be described as a woman sobbing. Was someone crying out there? Several sounds came, and it seemed that there might have been several people on the other side of the door. The door jarred itself as it looked like someone was going to open it, but then Harry heard a muffled, "Stupefy," followed by a heavy thump and someone saying, "You know the laws, the past cannot be changed, only observed." "I'm sorry." The footsteps got further away towards the direction of the front door, and Harry heard from the other side of his cupboard door someone say, "I'm sorry, Mr. Potter. This is not what you deserve. But I promise you, you'll be in a better place soon." Harry could hear the bitter sadness behind the stranger's voice and wondered what that person meant. The members of the Department of Mysteries left after using a variety of spells through Harry's cupboard door and now knew the exact physical condition of the boy who lived as well as the details of the space he had been living in for the last 9 years. Every member of the group's heart ached, but when using time turners to determine the cause of an event, they were forbidden from stopping it, no matter how unjust or heartbreaking. Some time after silence returned, Harry felt his body ache and crack. A moment later, Harry Potter exploded as he transmuted into a mass of semi-solid magic formed ash. Had Harry been more powerful, he could have survived his initial Obscurus transformation. However, the blood wards which were placed to protect him from magicals who sought him with ill intent, had been draining his own magic reserves for years. They were supposed to be powered by love and would only use Harry's magic as a fuel source in a pinch, but not a single trace of love for Harry would be found in the home, forcing the blood wards to drain Harry's magic instead. There was a reason they were considered illegal. Harry actually would have become an Obscurial 2 years prior had it not been for the drain delaying his magic from going critical after years of being suppressed. The black ash that could not be seen by non-magicals quickly dissipated, and with that, nothing was left of Harry Potter in this world. The assembled members of the Department of Mysteries watched without a single dry eye. They were a stoic profession, but this tragedy was something that would have the entirety of Greater Magical Britain drowning in tears before the next sundown. What none of the watchers concerned themselves with was the fate of the Dursleys. The residence had been obliterated to the point nothing stood higher than a meter off the ground from what was once a two-story building. No one would bother searching the wreckage for survivors. What was interesting was that the blood wards actually contained the explosion, preventing damage to the surrounding houses while amplifying it within the property line. The blood wards were of course examined thoroughly and would be documented for later review. After getting a few more readouts, they left to the agreed-upon location to wait until their originals had gone back in time before they could return and give their reports. Although the departments of mysteries employed those who sought answers to questions no one had ever answered, none of them were looking forward to giving the answers to the questions of what happened today to their fellow members. If possible, it might be better to put a lid on it, but they highly doubted that would be possible. Perhaps it would be for others, but not for Harry Potter. More than one had already determined a means to have it leak in a way that could not be traced back to them. They would not allow this matter to be swept under the rug. The almost 10-year-old boy himself, however, found that he was in a grassy plain. He no longer wore his cousin's oversized clothing but a plain white cotton shirt and tan pants. He even had shoes which both fit him and were comfortably tied. Before he could further question where he was, a familiar-looking black-haired man with glasses and a red-haired woman walked up to him and smiled. Without knowing why, Harry started crying as he could see real love in their eyes and unconsciously moved towards them. They rushed at him and embraced him into a hug. Harry didn't know how, but he knew these were his parents. No one said anything as each was crying. Ping! Harry lifted his head, which had been buried into his father's shoulder, and saw a floating display. Tutorial has begun. Time left for tutorial, 363 days, 20 hours, 16 minutes, 12 seconds. Press start. Although there was a timer, it did not move forward. Harry decided to ignore it for now, and after crying some more in his parents' arms he fell asleep. Some time later he woke to a clear, beautiful sky and saw that his parents' faces were still there, looking at him. Harry softly asked, "Are you my mum and dad?" The redhead answered, "Yes, sweetie, I'm Lily, and this is your father James." Harry asked, "Am I dead?" James smiled and answered back, "Yes, my son, but once you are ready you're going back to life." Harry looked thoughtful for a moment before frowning. "But what if I don't want to return?" Lily looked like she was going to cry again before she pushed it down and answered him back, "Harry, I can promise you no matter what, you are never going back to my sisters again." Harry could hear the righteous fury behind his mother's words and his heart felt warm. No one had ever been angry for him before. James nodded and said, "Harry, you've been given a special gift. No one can force you to use it, but if you do, you'll be able to see and experience wonderful things and do things others will speak of for generations to come." Harry looked back at the see-through screen with the frozen timer and said, "Is it that?" Lily nodded and said, "Yes, Harry. It's like a game, one of those that Dudley played. But instead of using a controller, you can play as you. If you click start, it will begin. If you pause it, you'll find yourself back here. You can keep it paused as long as you want, my dear." Harry wasn't aware when Lily started petting his head, but he instantly liked it. He stayed like that for a while until he started speaking with his parents and they started talking to him, telling him of their lives and their friends and family. Harry knew he could do magic thanks to an epiphany he had years ago, which was why he became an Obscurial in the first place. One can't consciously suppress magic without awareness that it's there. What he didn't know, however, was that both his parents could use magic as well and went to a castle for their schooling. Lily reminded Harry that once he returned to life, he would be able to go to Hogwarts too. Lily and James told Harry everything about themselves and later started teaching him everything they could think of. Harry was a very smart child, otherwise he wouldn't have figured out he could do magic so early in life. Until this point he had to make himself look slow or his relatives would accuse him of cheating and punish him for getting better grades than Dudley. Now, however, he wanted to make his parents proud and put every effort into learning everything they were willing to teach him. Lily taught Harry math, English, literature, and the basic sciences. James taught Harry about magic, about the Potter family, and about many forms of history, both mundane and magical. Often the space they were in would change to a classroom and they pulled out books to read with Harry and wrote things on a blackboard to go over with Harry. Other times the space would turn into a living room with cable TV and a selection of his parents' favorite movies. The space could even change into a game room with an arcade and several game stations of various generations with many dozens of video games, both retro and new. For what may have been months, years, or even longer, Harry spent time with his mother and father, getting the childhood and love he always craved. Although he was not pressured into it, eventually the temptation had won out and Harry pressed the start button. The game had begun. If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later, bye bye.